If we can use Coffee to imagine how web application works or even how social networks build, that would be great. Therefore, imagine that coffee beans are lava. Well, not quite. Let's imagine that coffee is a resource. Basically any kind of files you have on your PC, music, photograph, or, in other words, data. And, of course, computer is performing operations on data. And as you probably guessed, these operations are produced by computer programs. We often call them applications. Let's also imagine that any operation on data, in our case coffee beans, is performed by an application. So for example, milling is a program which transforms coffee beans into grounds of coffee. So now, having these two little assumptions, let's imagine how a simple web page works. Let's imagine James. He is a user in our case. Every day he comes by a magazine stand, and he takes a magazine about coffee. In this case, the magazine stand is a static website.
What?
It doesn't do any operations other than serving a magazine, that is why it is called static. And now James read about coffee and he wants an actual cup of coffee. And magazine stand is no help anymore because it can't do anything but hold a magazine. He went for a walk and he can buy a coffee shop. Happened to be this coffee shop has the best coffee in the town, but it follows a specific procedure to make it. But first, James came inside and he requested a maple latte. Maple latte, please. $6 and refills are free. Well, then only refills for me, please. This coffee shop has a storage which is located at the back of the store. And this is the first place where barista goes to get a coffee beans. Then, of course, barista is going to mill coffee beans and prepare a coffee. In this case, we will call a coffee shop a web application, and a web application which has a database. In this case, database is a storage where coffee beans are being stored, and of course we also call this type web server. But isn't it a complex task for our barista to talk to customers, serve them a coffee, and at the same time prepare a coffee and retrieve beans from the storage? Meh. So to help our barista, we can split our coffee shop into two parts. One part will talk to customers and serve them, and another part will retrieve beans from the storage and prepare coffee. In this case, it is common to hear that application has a backend and a frontend. In our case, storage is a backend and our shop is frontend. It is more complex concept to understand, because our actual front-end application is executed on the user side. And thus you can imagine James sitting at his home, and he bought this crazy coffee machine. He simply come, select a coffee, and voila, coffee is ready. But what is actually happening? Coffee beans are retrieved from our storage in a coffee shop. And then they are going through the milling stage, and grounds of coffee are going to be put into packages. Next, this package is going to be sent to James' coffee machine by fast delivery service. The front end is going to prepare a coffee, and in our case, the coffee machine after receiving a package will prepare coffee for James. Even though we optimized our application, it is barely enough to write a social network. Although we know that coffee will be prepared on the user side, in most cases we will want to know information such as how many users prepared coffee in the last week, what is the most common city users live, and maybe how much coffee they consume on a daily basis. It means that we are going to add an application to our backend which will collect and process data. We should also consider protecting our backend from unauthorized users. We definitely don't want pirates who will come and steal all our coffee beans and cookies.
Attack.
We may need to develop a few more services. We will need some sort of shipping department, accountant office, and so on. And at some point we are going to get a new problem, where our backend becomes so complex that we are unable to work with it anymore. We now have many developers and all of them are trying to improve our coffee shop at the same time. It is a total mess now. So what we can do with our backend to make it less messy?
What?
As you might guess, one of the solutions will be to split our web application again. But this time let's split each meaningful part of our coffee shop into a separate thing. As a result, the architecture of our coffee shop or our web application now called microservices architecture. Each part of our coffee shop or service is a standalone program. It means that in most cases they don't depend on each other. which in its turn allow our developers to work separately on each component and not to mess with each other.
What mess?
So to finalize, this is the most common types of web application architectures. Microservices architecture is very common for large web applications, and of course this type of architecture is very common for social network platforms. This is all I want to cover today. Thank you for joining me. Again, subscribing is very appreciated, and if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. And hope to see you in the next episode.